Welcome to another episode of the Gull-Mouth Action podcast, where we take a look at all the latest goings on at Brighton, Hove Albion and Crawley Town. I'm Matt Polt, and this week I'm joined by Brighton writer Derren Howard, Sam Morton, who covers both the Seagulls and Crawley Town, and Red Devils expert Mark Dunford. Brighton stemmed their poor run of form with an unbelievable come-from-behind home win over former manager Graham Potter's West Ham United. We'll look back at that extraordinary result, plus we'll bring you all the latest team news ahead of Albion's home clash with Champions League-chasing Newcastle, as well as all the latest from an emotional week at Crawley Town. You can read all the stories we are talking about, the videos and pictures online at sussexworld.co.uk/sport, and you can check out other great videos on shotstv.com and Freeview Channel 262. You may also be watching on latest TV, so thank you very much for tuning in. But we'll start at the Amex, where Carlos Balíba's stunning effort decided an enthralling 5-goal game and gave Brighton a first Premier League win in 6. Trailing 2-1 to West Ham with a minute to go, the home side levelled through Gull-Mouth Mitoma before, with almost the final kick of the game, Balíba fired powerfully past Hammer's keeper, Alphonse Areola, from outside the box. It was certainly a thriller, Derren. Sum that one up for us if you can. Where'd you start?
Yeah, I know. It was one of those matches. It was a really entertaining contest and had a bit of everything. And most importantly for Brighton, it had a last-minute winner as well, which they really needed because they've been on this terrible run of form where they'd slipped down the table. But that one, the 3 points against West Ham, puts them back into the mix for European football. So they've got 4 matches to go, starting this Saturday against Newcastle. And yeah, they're really pushing now for the European places. And you think the manner of the victory as well, with the last minute strike, would really, so it should really boost morale. There's nothing like a last minute winner to get the crowd going, to get the team going. And you could just see the messages that Brighton players were posting on social media, how the fans were reacting to it. And even I think Sam's going to talk about it later, but for Fabian Herzella as well, he hasn't always had the best relationship with the Brighton fans, but there was a moment there where he was really enjoying it. He was the crowd, and he had a moment with the crowd as well. So hopefully that's sort of a turning point for him as well. So I was quite pleased for him in that respect. But it was they had their sort of, obviously Mitoma was on the bench to start with. Lovely goal from Yassin Ayari to get Brighton going, and they were pegged back. Mitoma came off the bench and looked a real threat as well. He's still recovering from his heel injury, so he's only playing a little bit at the moment. But he got the goal, and then Carlos Balíba. So it's probably Yassin Ayari, Mitoma and Balíba have been 3 of Brighton's best players this season. So it's quite good to see them all make a major contribution. And Balíba's goal, he played at centre-back for the game because of Jan-Paul van Hecke's head injury that he sustained against Brentford. And he powered forward and curled one in the last minute. So it's how much is he worth now as well? So he's been brilliant this season. So I'm sure Brighton will be sort of fending off some bids for him after his performances, and that would have put him in the spotlight even more. But great game, really good, entertaining game.
It was indeed, and just 180 seconds separated Mitoma's equaliser and Balíba's dramatic winner. Sam, how season-defining could those 180 seconds be for Brighton and Fabian Herzella? Is it the spark the Seagulls need to go on a run of results over the final 4 games and maybe qualify for Europe?
I think so. It could be absolutely massive because it ended a run of 6 games without a win in all competitions, and things were looking really bleak. And it looked like we're heading for a 4th defeat in 5 league games when Soucek completed the turnaround for the Hammers, and you kind of just felt like yet again Brighton were going to lose a Premier League game. And it was quite remarkable that after conceding so late on, they managed to turn the game on its head once again and to win the game. And it just shows kind of how much resilience is in the team. And despite all the blows they've been taking recently, they've still got that fight and belief in each other and the manager. And that was really great to see. And credit must go to Brian Gruder, who got 2 assists, obviously, to win the game. First one was a great cushioned header from Mitoma. Second one, admittedly, was probably more simple. Just give the ball to Balíba and he let fly from distance. I think that's really great to see because Gruder's obviously had limited minutes for Brighton, and just players like that can really make it an impact. Obviously, with players out injured, such as Jorginho, Rutter, you need players to take their opportunity when they get them to really make a difference in these tight games. And they're going to definitely need that kind of inspiration from these players in the final few games of the season. But it definitely will be morale boosting in that race for the 8th place, which we know would likely secure a place in the Conference League next season. Just the unfortunate bit for Brighton is that Fulham also hit a late winner against Southampton to stay above Brighton, but Bournemouth conceded very late to draw against Manchester United, which was that equaliser did Brighton a really big favour. So Albion back up to 9th, just below Fulham on goal difference. There's just actually 3 goals in it on goal difference, and the Seagulls had the benefit of 6 more goals scored across the season at the moment. They've got tough matches to finish the season against Champions League-chasing Newcastle before travelling to inform Wolves. Then they face champions Liverpool before travelling to struggling Tottenham. But Fulham and Bournemouth's run isn't much easier. The Cottages have got Villa, Everton, Brentford and Man City. And the Cherries have got Arsenal, Aston Villa, City and Leicester. So, yes, and both teams have got some real tough matches coming up in the final 4 games. So, yeah, it'll be an interesting race for 8th place. But I think that win at the weekend really does put Brighton in a good position, and hopefully they can build on it.
Yeah, hopefully they can. And Derren, you mentioned Ayari. His goal against West Ham was his first for Albion since his arrival from Swedish club AIK in 2023. How impressive was the midfielder on the day, and how impressed have you been with him since he's got back into Herzella's starting 11?
Yeah, he's been very good, Matt. In fact, it's probably one of my favourite stories of the season, to be honest. He came from, not much was expected of him, if I'm honest, this year. I thought at the beginning of the campaign he'd be sent out on another loan, especially when Brighton spent so much money bolstering their midfield as well. And he had a loan last season in the Championship with Blackburn and then Coventry. And yeah, there was nothing in those performances with those 2 teams to suggest that he could have a major impact on Brighton this season. But he came out with a quote at the beginning of the season. He said, "Look, I don't care who Brighton sign. I don't care how much money they spend. Nobody's going to work harder than me. Nobody's going to try harder than me." And Sam was speaking about players taking their opportunities with Rutter being injured. And I just think Ayari, from the start, he's just taken his opportunity this season. And again, credit to Herzella as well. He spotted something in him in pre-season. He had a good tour when they went over to Japan for pre-season, and he impressed in a couple of the friendlies over there, and obviously made a good impression in the training and in the pre-season training camps. And Herzella spotted something in him that he thought, I can use. And he's a very energetic player. He runs all day, which is so vital in the midfield in the Premier League these days. But he's got a good touch. Good passing, very, very good technically, and as you saw against West Ham, he can pick out a goal as well, and he's performing at a consistently high level. I'd still say there's room for improvement. He's still very young and he can get better and better, but he's playing well for his country. He's playing well at international level, and for Brighton as well. So he's been a real success story this season, and if Brighton do managed to get over the line and get a European place this season, he would have been a major factor in that. So yeah, full credit to him. Really good.
Absolutely. Long may it continue. Post-match, West Ham boss Graham Potter held what can only be described as an incredibly bizarre press conference where he spoke about swearing and not being a robot.
Loved it.
Yeah, very odd. Sam,
it's so weird.
Decipher what he was on about, and how was he received? Obviously, he left him under quite a cloud, didn't he, when he departed Brighton for Chelsea? Was it a warm welcome he got?
I wouldn't say a warm welcome, but it certainly wasn't as bad as it was when he came back with Chelsea. That was obviously quite a hostile reception he got then. So I think it's toned down a little bit, but there were some jeers from the home fans when he arrived and when he departed the pitch at the end of the game. But it was a dreadful result for West Ham, whose dismal run extended to seven games without a win. Potter's just taken just 13 points from 14 games since replacing Julian Lopetegui in January. So it's not going well, it's safe to say, and he really is feeling the pressure by the sounds of his post-match comments. And he said, "We're unable to sustain what we need to do to win games in the Premier League at the moment." He was clearly fuming about the result. And he said there's a physical requirement in the league. You have to be so fit, so physically strong to see out winning situations in difficult places like Goodison Park, like Anfield, and here at the Amex Stadium. So we're not able to see it. So everything is focused on that. It's a shame because there were lots of good things, but you can't take any solace because of the result. He said the pain is pretty hard. The lads are devastated. We're all devastated, and he can't speak about the positives because no one wants to hear them. He was actually asked by Henry, at Sussex World, what he thought of Brighton's game plan and what it was like to be back at the Amex. And he said, whenever you win, you're a genius. And you have all of these game plans. I don't know. I can't speak about Brighton, was his sharp response. He didn't want to dwell too much on that at all. And he kind of just said that congratulations to Brighton, but we're suffering as West Ham players and other fans. So he didn't understandably want to talk about other things apart from West Ham, obviously. He said, of course, I'm going to be frustrated. He's not a robot. He's a human being. He gives everything to what he's trying to do. Of course, he's going to be upset and frustrated. And he has to try and speak calmly in these interviews, but it's not how he's feeling inside. He said, if you want me to swear, I can swear, basically. So, absolute roller coaster of an interview, really, from Graham Potter. And he clearly is feeling the pressure, and probably understandably so with the results the way they are. And I think when he was at Brighton, he obviously got a lot of stick for perhaps being too to the point and not showing enough emotion. I think there was a bit of that at Chelsea as well. When he said, I think he said he couldn't really win. However, he was in these interviews where he was kind of like angry or calm, and you just felt like there's no winning situation. So, he's definitely feeling the world on his shoulders at the moment. Is Graham Potter, and it's quite a fall from grace when you consider when he was at Brighton, everything was really rosy for him, and you felt like the England job could be in line for him. And he goes to Chelsea, and it's gone a bit wrong there, and it's just all gone a bit downhill. So, I mean, for his sake, I hope he does pick up to what he was doing at Brighton, and that brilliant run of form they had before he obviously got moved to Chelsea. But it's not going too well for him at the moment.
It was disappointing that a journalist didn't say, I want you to swear, and just see what swear word he used.
What swear words does he have? But I have to add as well, when he said congratulations to Brighton, it wasn't a sincere congratulations. No. It was said through gritted teeth and a very, it wasn't, it's sort of like sincere, but yeah.
Find it quite amusing that all it took was a question from Henry to tip him over the edge. By that point, he'd well and truly had enough, bless him.
We've all been there. Yeah. We've all been there, Graham.
Good work, Henry. Long way to continue. This Sunday sees Albion entertain Carabao Cup holders Newcastle. The Magpies beat Ipswich Town 3-0 at St James's Park last weekend to move up to third in the Premier League and also relegate the Tractor Boys. How do you see this game going for Brighton, Derren? I think we say this every podcast, but it's another tough test for them. And what's the latest injury news from the Seagulls camp going into that one?
Yeah, it will be a tough test. Yeah, and it's interesting as well with how new. I remember Graham Potter when he took the job at West Ham. He referenced Eddie Howe to say that he had a lot of time out of the game, and then went to Newcastle and did a superb job then. And when Potter got the job at West Ham, he was hoping to repeat, a similar level of success. And obviously it hasn't quite worked out that way. Eddie Howe's done, obviously very well at Newcastle, and glad he's sort of back to health and leading the team once again. And they're third in the table. They've won 6 of their last 7. So they're going to be very, very strong, and they're pushing for the Champions League spots. It looks as though they'll be in Champions League football next season. So a very tricky one for Brighton, but Brighton have beat them twice this season, both at St James's Park, once in the FA Cup and once in the league. Danny Welbeck got the winner on both occasions. So he'll be hoping to get a hat-trick of winners against Newcastle, I'm sure, this weekend. But it's a big game for Brighton, and sometimes Brighton are at their best when they're up against it. When you think that they're going to win, they always seem to struggle, and when they play these top teams, they seem to raise their game and produce better football. So I'm quite optimistic. I'm hoping that the late winner against West Ham will give everybody a lift, give the whole club a lift as well. They've got some players coming back in as well. So Joel Veltman was in the match day squad against West Ham, but he didn't come on. He could potentially be a starter for this one now that he's fit. And if Lewis Dunk plays again like he did against West Ham rather than what he did against Leicester, then Van Hecker is also likely to come back. He'll be assessed following injuries still, but he is expected to return to the starting 11 as well. So yeah, Brighton are in good shape. So hopefully they can continue that push for the European places against Newcastle.
Yeah, should be a great game. We will take a short break now, but stay tuned as we are discussing all things Crawley Town. Welcome back to part 2, and we will start with the news that every Crawley Town fan has been dreading, and it has felt like it's been coming for a while, but the Reds have been relegated from League One. Crawley were demoted after Burton claimed the point they needed to secure safety after a home draw with Wigan on Tuesday night. It goes without saying, Mark, incredibly disappointing they've gone down. But what has the reaction to the news been that they've gone down from the supporters and the club, and where did it go wrong for the Reds this season? I know that's probably going to be quite a long answer, but I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, there's quite a lot that went wrong this year, wasn't there? But the reaction-wise, it's been quite accepting, really. I think after that late Burton goal on Saturday against Cambridge United, which just took the wind out, you felt the whole stadium just deflate when there was such a good feel-good atmosphere after the win, and they were 1-1 Burton, and then they scored 3 minutes into injury time. But I think after last night, it was just right, let's get on to next season. There's so much optimism now because of what Scott Lindsay's achieved in these last 8 games so far, 9 on Saturday. So I think generally it hasn't been like all doom and gloom, which you would expect normally when a team is relegated. But where it went wrong, I mean, you could start at the summer, couldn't you? Some people would blame it on that, getting rid of half the squad. But I kind of look at that in the sense of, look where all those players are now. I know it's different players flourish at different places at different times, etc. But half the MK Dons, half the players went to MK Dons. Look where they are in League Two. Corey Adai isn't getting selected for Stockport. Will Wright, Swindon, they were struggling for a long time, but they're doing okay now. Danilo Orsi was at Burton, scored a few goals, but then got put on loan to MK Dons. So you can look at all those players and that and just think, would they, even with Scott Lindsay, and if they'd all stuck together, would they have done well in League One? We don't know. There's lots of ifs and buts in this answer, but then Lindsay leaving is obviously a big, massive thing. And there's the appointment of Rob Elliott, who had a good record. It obviously wasn't proving anywhere near League One level, but had a good record. But he only won, I think it was 6 of 33 games that he was in charge of. And that's just obviously not good enough. And you would have thought, given if they didn't want to get relegated, they should have made the change earlier. But if you make the change earlier, Scott Lindsay might not be available. So another ifs and buts. But you look at the games, certainly under Rob Elliott, the Exeter game, huge. 4-1 up at half-time. No team should be throwing away a 4-1 lead at half-time to draw 1-1. So that's 2 points dropped. The Wrexham game, which was nobody's fault, they played so well that game. Bradley Ibrahim scores that stunning equaliser in the last minute, and then Elliot Lee pulls every Crawley Town defender to the ground before he gets to the ball and a goal and scores. Denies another point. Peterborough, the last minute penalty given away by Adi Adeyemo, where they lose 4-3. That's another point. Stevenage, they were 1-1, but they're in 2 goals in the last couple of minutes. That's another point. Bolton away, they were 3-1 up and lost 4-3. So you can look at all these results and performances, majority under Rob Elliott, where they just couldn't hold on to a really good lead. They played really well in parts for half a game, and then it just So there's lots of things you could point at. I think a lot of the fans will point at Wagme and say you shouldn't have got rid of all of our team.
I was just going to ask you that, Mark. I know that probably Crawley fans are sat there listening, going, "Go on, hammer Wagme," but can they shoulder some portion of the blame? I don't think it's entirely on them, I must admit.
It's not entirely on them at all. No, I don't think so. And it's funny, going back to the reaction, there wasn't a lot aimed at Wagme. There was a lot of comments aimed at Wagme. He said, "Right, back Scott now. This is where you can sort of save yourself," kind of thing. But I don't think you can. But I mean, it would have been interesting. It would have been lovely to see that squad of last year have a chance of having a go at League One, just to see how they would have got on. Personally, they might have survived, but I don't think they would have set the world alight. there would have been a lot of frustrating results. And that, if Scott Lindsay had saved the whole season, me and you went through the stats this morning, didn't we?
We did.
I think we're going to get onto it in a bit, aren't we?
We are, yes.
Yeah, so we'll get onto that in a bit. But his points average, if he'd stayed the whole season, could have been a different story. But they didn't. Yeah, they still lack that. I mean, Hepburn Murphy's been really good in the last few games, but they still lack that proper goal scorer up top. The Nilo Orsi, the goal poacher, they still need that. So there's lots of things you point, but yeah, Wagme can certainly shoulder some of the blame. One for the squad and one for not acting quicker with Rob Elliott, because there was at one point where you just sensed Rob Elliott's not the right man for this job. Lovely bloke. Obviously got some good ideas, but it was too much of a jump for him from National League to League One. So you can blame Wagme for that part of it, but I think Rob Elliott's got to shoulder a lot of blame for the performances, some of the decisions. Every time at one point there was a run of games where every time he made a substitute, they seemed to let in a goal. And I know you can't blame him specifically for that, but if they hadn't made the substitute, probably wouldn't have let in the goal and things like that. So I think, a bit of Wagme, a bit of Rob Elliott, and obviously the players are the ones that go on the pitch and do it. So some of them have to shoulder some responsibility as well. Certainly the defence at times, I would say.
Yeah, I think that's a very reasonable answer.
That was a long enough answer for you, wasn't it? This is an extra long episode today, I think.
Mark mentioned that we did some number crunching, and we worked out the Reds manager Scott Lindsay has averaged, we think, 1.42 points per game in all the League One games he's managed this season. That includes his first few games at the start of the season and his return, which over 45 matches will have put them in the top half of the table. We think it would have put them 9th or 10th, depending on goal difference. But with all that being said, Sam, I know it's early days. Is there a sense that Crawley could make not maybe an instant return, but certainly be up there next season under Lindsay in League Two?
100%. Yeah, I think anything's possible under Scott Lindsay. We've seen he nearly worked a miracle. If a couple of results had gone slightly differently, it could very much have been a case of keeping Crawley in the league, which when he took over seemed scarcely believable when you think how far behind the pack they actually were, and he really did put it really close, and it really was a point here and there made such a huge difference. I mean, there's so many results you can look back on, but particularly that Peterborough game, the last-minute winner in the second 4-3 of the season, and just things like that. Obviously, the Wrexham one, where they were obviously really hard done by to lose so late on, when it was obviously a foul and build up to the goal, and just so many occasions where they've been winning and they've managed to lose or draw, and it's a shame in that sense that obviously they did have that opportunity, and obviously it kind of summed up the season where Crawley had obviously had a 3-0 win against Northampton. We're celebrating the fact that Cambridge had equalised against Burton, and suddenly the dream was back on again. And then next thing you know, Burton have scored the winner, and obviously Scott and the players have found out as they're doing their lap of appreciation. So it was a real bitter pill to swallow, and Burton then obviously got the job done. But it was obviously Ronan Darcy that scored the equaliser for Wigan last night. So there's, in an alternate reality somewhere, that goal from Ronan Darcy kept Crawley in the league. But unfortunately, it wasn't to be. But I think, next season, I think if you keep hold of the core group of players and not make the same mistake as this season, as obviously because it's let too many players go, and I think it would probably be easier to keep hold of their best players after relegation than it was after a promotion. So there's that silver lining. But I would love to see players like Hepburn Murphy, Charlie Barker, Jeremy Kelly stay, just to name just a few. They need to get the goalkeeping situation sorted. Toby Stewart looked good in a couple of games he played at the end of the season. See what happens with him. Be interesting to see if they can tempt Kamari Doyle to come back for another season, perhaps on loan. I know they've flirted with the idea of how much would it take. It would be incredible. So I think from his point of view, he's probably going to want to go to a League One side, or even Championship, to be honest, because he was brilliant in League One this season. It'll be a tough one to try and get back, but you never know. And I'm sure Scott Lindsay's got some plans up his sleeve in terms of signings and whatnot. So, I think there's plenty of reasons to be positive for Crawley, and hopefully they'll have a really strong season in League Two and be promoted back to League One following year.
Fingers crossed. I think we're in for a very interesting summer by all accounts. But as you mentioned there, Sam, the Reds did manage to pick up a fine win on Saturday against Northampton in their final home game of the campaign. Rushing Hepburn Murphy, Jeremy Kelly and the aforementioned Kamari Doyle were all on target as Crawley swept the Cobblers aside, and it sounded like a complete performance all round, Mark.
It really was. It was. People always talk about teams being on the beach, like Northampton and Exeter, in the last 2 games. People always say, "Oh no, they won't be. They're professionals," and that. Northampton had no intensity whatsoever. I mean, and that's not to take anything for the way Crawley played. Crawley didn't let Northampton get into the game at all, but you could tell that there was a team playing for something and there was a team not playing for anything. And they were, and had a horrible kit as well. Northampton, I don't know if you've seen the pictures, yellow and burgundy. It was horrible. But Crawley, it was. I mean, we're getting on to why it was a particularly emotional day later. But
yes,
it was a really, really good performance. And the only disappointment, and Scott Lindsay actually called it a big regret afterwards, was they didn't score more goals because obviously at some point it looked like Crawley were taking it to the last game. And if they'd scored 3 or 4 more goals, which they probably should have for the chances they had, they could have closed that gap on the goal difference with Burton. But in the end, that was irrelevant. But they were really good. Hepburn Murphy, I mean, he could have had a hat trick easily. And it was a surprise. It took him 39 minutes to take the lead. It was a really good goal, really good finish. A lovely ball from Panucci Camara, I think it was. Or was it Jeremy Kelly? Can't remember which one. But then, and then the second half, it was just one-way traffic the whole way, and they could have had loads. They could have won 6-0, and it wouldn't have been unfair on Northampton. Hepburn Murphy, it was a bit disappointing he couldn't add 2 or 3 more goals to his tally because he was just running them absolutely ragged. Jeremy Kelly, bit of a spoiler for Sam's next bit, but he won Crawley Observer Player of the Year, which I awarded to him after the game, and he was magnificent again. He was so good. He just has this ability just to get the ball and just turn on a sixpence, and you see like they might have 2 or 3 Northampton players on him, and then suddenly they've all gone the wrong way because he's just turned so quickly. He's fantastic to watch. Kamari Doyle, when he came on, was really good. Panucci Camara in the last 3 or 4 games has been absolutely magnificent. I've been quite critical of him this year. I didn't think he certainly wasn't up to the levels he was when he was first at Crawley, when he became a fan's favourite. But he was brilliant again on Saturday. So it's all it does is give real optimism going into next season because Scott Lindsay had that team playing. But you look at those players, you don't know who's got relegation clauses in their contracts, things like that. Some of them will be wanting to play in League One next season. Some of them might want to think, right, no, we've got something good here. We can get back to League One. They're all quite young. So it'll be interesting to see who they do keep and who they release and that. So but real optimism for next year. And it was just a really good occasion. And it was just gutting at the end of the game when all the players went to the dressing room, came back out to see all the fans, say goodbye, thanks for your support for their last home game. And Scott Lindsay said as they were going around clapping the crowd, one fan that he sort of recognised looked at him and just went like that, meaning obviously that Burton have scored. Yeah, because he. Sorry, right. That looked really threatening.
Scott didn't do that bad.
He went. And I got it on video and I tweeted it. Like Scott Lindsay went over to Sam Gadsden, who had his phone out, and you saw Scott Lindsay turn away and just say an expletive, shall we say, and just looked really disappointed. And then he just clapped the crowd for the rest of it, sort of thing. You could see, and then in the press conference afterwards, you could tell by the body language, it was just like, although mathematically it wasn't over, it was over, kind of thing. So, really good occasion though, and a really good performance.
Yeah, and you mentioned the awards.
Sorry, chap. Can I just say, I'm just going to have to say goodbye. I just need to nip away quickly. And just for the score prediction, I think Brighton's going to be draw 2-2 against Newcastle. But
lovely. All right, Derren, mate.
Take care, Derren.
Right.
Till next
See you
week.
next time.
We'll have to remember that. I would probably go for a draw as well, but we'll come on to that later on. You mentioned the end of season awards there, Mark. Who won what, Sam? I think there was a player, apart from Mark, who bucked the trend a little bit. There was a player who swept a little bit, didn't they?
Yes, Charlie Barker won 2 awards. It's obviously been a disappointing season for the Reds on the pitch, but Barker has been a real bright spark for Crawley. The 22-year-old defender picked up the Players Player Award, presented by club captain Dion Conroy, and also the Player of the Season Award, presented by Scott Lindsay himself. Groundsman Ben Harwood was awarded the Danny Bullman Award for Outstanding Contribution for his unwavering commitment and dedication to the club over the last 14 years. That was presented by General Manager Tom Allman. Jane Hillman won the Clubman Award for the fantastic work with the first team this season. That was presented by Vice Chairman Ben Levin. And as Mark's mentioned, the Crawley Observer Player of the Year went to none other than Jeremy Kelly, who's one of the few players that's still remaining from last season and that promotion campaign. And he's been brilliant yet again for Crawley, despite that step up to League One. He's been fantastic and just so consistent throughout the season. Was a very deserved winner. And Bradley Ibrahim won goal of the season for his stunning strike against Wrexham at the Broadfield Stadium, which unfortunately was in a defeat. As I mentioned earlier on, it was a bit of an unjust defeat against Wrexham, and that could have been, obviously very costly in Crawley's relegation in the end. But a stunning goal that definitely deserved more than the result on the day.
I just remember, just before I mention, the way we did our award was based on the player ratings, and it was the average over the season. So every game, our journalists will rate them out of 10. And I think Jeremy Kelly averaged 7.2 something. So you can tell how low the average the player ratings were for most of the season. But he just edged out Charlie Barker, who would have swept all the awards, pretty much all the awards. And Charlie Barker was up for goal of the season as well. So he could have easily won all of them, apart from the Clubman in the year and that or whatever. But I would have given it to him because he's been brilliant. So
there you go. Well, as you alluded to earlier, Mark, it was very much an emotional day at the Broadfield Stadium as Crawley Town paid tribute to Ken Blackmore, who passed away this week. Treble Ken, as he was affectionately known, was a lifelong fan and club volunteer and loved by all who knew him. For those who didn't know Ken, what was he like, Mark? I'm sure that the Reds went all out to celebrate his life, and was it a fitting day for him?
Oh, well, first of all, it was a really fitting day. You could sense the emotion as soon as you turned up at the ground. All the stewards, you could say there was a sadness around the place. But also, you walked in the stadium, there was flowers outside. What did it say on? Because they've got a red brick wall on the stadium outside where fans could have bought a little red brick, and he had bought one, and it said Crawley till I die, and in brackets and beyond. And it's just like that sort of really poignant kind of message from him from above, as it were. And then you walked into the press room where he made cups of tea for everyone, looked after the press, told them where to sit, helped them find their plugs if they needed them, and that. And there was a picture and flowers there. His seat was his baseball cap, and some flowers were on the seat he sat in during games. There was a minute's applause beforehand. Panucci Camara held up a Crawley shirt at the end with Travel Ken #1 on, because Travel Ken was how he's known, because he used to organise the away trips. And then he used to go to all the games and commentate with Gary Smith on the BBC and iFollow. But he was just a huge character that everyone at Crawley Town knew. He was a lifelong fan, and he's a club volunteer for years. Scott Lindsay said afterwards he used to love watching him shuffle around the corridors. I mean, I've been obviously covering Crawley on and off for 20 years now, and I've turned up to the ground and seen Ken painting, drilling things, cleaning, putting up shelves, making tea, just everything. He just did absolutely everything, and he was such a character. I mean, me and Sam spoke to his son on Saturday, and Sam mentioned that about. I mean, I think there was one game where Sam turned up very close to kickoff, and what I like to call Grinner time, because that's when Grinner used to turn up. Frank Carter, for anyone who knew. And from that moment, every game, he'd have a go at Sam for being late. And that was the kind of character he was. He had a joke with everyone. He had banter, and he was just he was a brilliant, real character. Yeah,
he's brilliant guy, and I really enjoyed kind of chatting to him at match days, and he really was always happy, wasn't he, Mark? Really, he was just really lovely chat to be around, making all the teas and coffees for the journalists and stuff. So they'll be really missed. The match, according to home games, won't be the same. So it won't be the same without him.
And just want to say the players absolutely love him as well, because there was a before every game, whereas they came out to train and that, like last year when Danilo Orsi, every time he came out, he'd just shout from the stand, "Feed the horse," and things like that. And the players and the fans absolutely love him.
Yes,
he'll be sorely missed.
He will indeed, and we'd obviously like to extend our deepest sympathies to the Blackmore family as well. And as Sam and Mark said, he will be dearly, dearly missed. Crawley Town end their League One campaign at bottom of the table. Shrewsbury this Saturday, and I'm sure the Reds will want to end the season on a high. Sam, how do you see this one going?
This can be a quick answer because there's nothing in this game.
Yeah, exactly. Nothing riding on this game, unfortunately. But I can see Crawley winning to end the season on a bit of a high. The goals are flying in at the moment. 6 scored and just 1 conceded in the last 3 games. Shrewsbury rock bottom of the league. I can only see a Crawley win.
Yeah. Well, go on then. We'll rattle through these score predictions then. We'll start Shrewsbury. Shrewsbury Crawley. What are we going for? Starting with you. We'll start with you, Sam.
I'm going to go with a 3-0 win to Crawley.
Mark?
One better. I'm going to go 4-0.
4-0. That'd be great into the season with Crawley. And Derren has already given his score prediction for Brighton against Newcastle. He's going for a draw. Mark, how do you see this one going on Sunday?
Newcastle win, I reckon. I reckon 2-1 Newcastle. Yeah,
I can only see a Newcastle win. What about you, Sam? What do you reckon?
Oh, it's a tough one to call. I think Brighton with the home advantage. I think a 1-1 draw.
1-1 draw, and I think they'll take that as well. Well, brilliant. Thank you very much for joining us this week, chaps. So you can catch up with all the latest sports news covering everything we have talked about today. sussexworld.co.uk/sport. And you can watch more excellent videos on shotstv.com and Freeview channel 262. Thank you very much for tuning in, and we will see you all next week.